Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Harebrained Games. Today we're going to take a look at a game called Imperial Struggle. Now, in 2005, two prolific designers put together a game called Twilight Struggle, which was a reenactment of the Cold War with the U.S. and the Russians, the USSR, going at it in Cold War battle. It was and remains my favorite game of all time. I absolutely adore it. It is number one. I don't even hesitate when people ask me, what's your favorite game of all time? Twilight Struggle. There are a lot of great games that have come since in the 15 years since that game is, but none of them have surpassed that game on my number one. This is my favorite game of all time over the course of years and years and years. So I was giddy when Imperial Struggle was announced a few years ago, and I've been watching its development carefully. This is a game for 2 players featuring the French against the British in a similar struggle, but not identical. Let's take a look at what's in the box.
This is the game board, and it is chock filled with all kinds of information. Those of you familiar with Twilight Struggle will notice that whereas Twilight Struggle was generally a standardized map of the world with rectangular areas for control, this just blossoms into a whole cacophony of different shapes, sizes, colors, events, things going on left or right. While it looks daunting, it actually can be broken down pretty well into some constituent parts to help lay the underpinning of how you are going to play Imperial Struggle. Let's get into that now. There are 4 regions which will be contested over by the British and the French over the course of the game. These 4 spheres represent different areas of Europe, India, the Caribbean, and the Americas. You will also notice a general records track which keeps count of pretty much everything from victory points to how much debt each of the nations accrues, treaty points that are basically bonus points that you will earn over time, and that's about it. Victory points for the British. If the British can make the victory point track go to 0, then they automatically win. However, if France can get up to 30 points, they win. So it's a back and forth track. It's a tug of war, to be precise. We also have the event deck and the investment tiles. This is the core of the engine, which is going to drive what you're able to do every turn. Investment tiles will be different. They should be here, but I use a cup for it instead. But each of the investment tiles has a major power that you can use in one of 3 realms: economic, military, or political, and a minor action, which has a much lesser, there are rules on it that don't exist for major tiles. An event deck, there are event decks similar to Twilight Struggle. You have 3 different event decks. You begin with the succession era, and these events are going to vary. Each player is going to get 3 of these. They generally have a benefit for the British, separate from a benefit for the French. And again, those will be made manifest during gameplay. Also, every player gets their own board, and this is sort of your command console that you will use to spread out your forces, handle wars, handle peace, handle everything. You have advantage tiles, which you will get across the map as you play. Advantage tiles are bonuses that boost you, that can be used usually once a turn. You have squadrons. This is your naval presence. You have war tiles. These are the basic, not so great war tiles, but then you always have a chance to have bonus tiles, which are stronger and heftier and do more things for you in the combat portions of the game. Once again, every player starts the game with 3 events, which we already covered, and every player starts with 3 events, as we already covered, and each side gets a minister deck. So not only do you have event cards, you have minister cards. These are sort of persistent effects that you can use, and each card is a little different, so its rules kind of break the rules. So there's no set particular, like, play it during this phase or whatever. You will place 2 down for each of the eras that occur, and you will on each turn be able to somewhat modify or manipulate the ministry cards available to you. They have keywords that can power events, so if you happen to have this minister up and this minister is finance, then an event that gives you a bonus if you have a minister of finance will boost the event's power. So it all kind of fits together in this mesh of inner relationships. And that's it. That's the British have a player mat, the French have a player mat, and that's the end of that. The last of the sort of vestigial parts, although this is by no means vestigial, is the war sheets. There are four. 1, 2, 3, 4. They're double-sided. War of the Spanish Succession, War of the Austrian Succession, 7 Years' War, and the American War for Independence. This is a hefty side quest, we'll put it that way, to the game. During the course of play, and we'll look at the turn track now. There are 6 turns in a game. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 3 different eras when those turns occur. And interspersed in between turns, you will have a war at given times. And that war, when it's time for that war to take place, this is the epicenter of the war actions. Each of the 2 sides has war tiles. These are boosts, benefits, bonuses. For numerical strength. You boost these throughout the game using military points, or certain tiles let you swap out a crappy basic tile for a better one. This one's not too great. But you'll notice the 4 theaters: Central Europe, Spain, Queen Anne's War, and the Jacobite Rebellion. All 4 wars have 4 different fronts, and those 4 fronts will affect certain portions of the map. In this case, Europe, and North America are the 3 hotspots, the center points, the focus points for the battle. When you are calculating wars, the conclusion of the war, you will take these tiles. You will also look at the different countries that say that they provide additional strength for whichever side politically influences them. And sometimes your squadrons on the map, conflict markers. There's a variety of different things that offer bonuses in these 4 theaters. You are tracking these 4 simultaneously, and so you simply can't just choose to focus on one without having risked starvation of conquest on the other 3. As you win or lose, you will have an opportunity to gain bonuses in each of these wars, everything from victory points to combat points, which are powerful ways to blaze across the map and do some pretty distracting damage to the battle lines or the territorial gains or the markets of your opponent. The loser also gets a consolation prize, the Wink Martindale lovely prizes for you backdoor kind of gift, so that it doesn't get too far askew, too far fast. Although if you do win all 4 of these wars, it's not good for your opponent. And that's it. Now let's get to the actual elephant in the room, the map itself. Okay, the map looks daunting. To be honest with you, when I first looked at this, after thinking, oh, Twilight Struggle, look at the map, let's look, I honestly thought it was just a total piece of spectacular ingenuity that I would not be able to get my head around. Turns out, not so true. Contemplation moments for a couple minutes, and you will understand this map well enough to begin play. The first thing is to set out of your mind all of the clutter, like the background map. Set aside the colors, the adornments, the decor, the symbols, the logos, the outlining. Just set it all aside and focus on just the shapes. The shapes of each of these areas. We'll go over them one by one. We'll go over first the diamonds. Let's go over the diamonds. The diamonds, if you just focus on them, forget everything else, don't even worry about their colors or the dots or the numbers or whatever. The diamonds are all about political influence. These are the slushy, intellectual, let's be friends, let's not, let's kind of be friends kind of thing. Political influence is one entire sphere that you will be adding to or removing from. Everybody, you'll notice at the start of the game, for example, that with Spain, there's an alliance between France and Spain. Of course, Spain could also be allied with both of them at the same time. This is possible. This is double talk in full motion. Each of these diamonds represents the political influence. Of itself, it's important to have more influence in this sphere than your opponent for scoring, for the non-war scoring. But for the most part, you're definitely dealing with just influences back and forth. These influences will help you in wartime. They will give you a boost up in war if you happen to have an alliance with the Dutch Republic or the German states, and that war particularly wants you to have such influence in order to gain additional strength. As we said, it is possible for multiple influences to happen. This is just the diamonds. All they do is influence. And you will notice in the different spheres, as you get to other spheres, the political part takes a back seat. Here, you don't find nearly as many political influence spots. Here, again, very few in the way of political influence spots, and the same with the Americas. Mostly Europe is the one that goes back and forth with the ideological, sociological, treaty back and forth, etc., alliance, lack of alliance. That's really the epicenter of the politics for the most part. And that's it. Now let's get to the next shape, and that shape will be territories. You'll notice there are very few territories. Territories are squares. Territories are really of themselves not that valuable or spectacular in that they don't provide you bonuses or generally help with wars, etc. However, they are the gateway, the key, sort of the anchor that you want to protect. They represent land, and there's nothing political about them. They don't care if you like them or hate them. They don't care if you have markets on top of them, and they certainly don't care if you shoot at them. They're dirt. But they are important because by keeping tethered and not losing these territories, you are able to keep a gateway into this particular region. Losing territories, while boring as they may seem of themselves, is a huge hit if you lose them. And again, you have not much in the way of territories here. Pretty much Europe's kind of known by the time this happens. However, India, you do have territorial entry points. The Caribbean as well, you'll have entry points, and of course the Americas. All right, we've covered diamonds, we've covered squares. Now let's cover circles. Circles are markets. This is your economic facet of Imperial Struggle, and they're all here, and they all have circles with costs in order to flag them. They call it flagging, but it's really taking ownership. And the markets are different in two ways. One, markets have to be connected. You can't simply drop flags wherever you want. Whereas in the political, you can always go send an ambassador somewhere and talk it out and get a new deal going on. But here in the markets, you have a lot more. You're talking infrastructure, connectivity, protection, all these things. And so it's very important that your markets stay connected. These are the ones that have lines of control, or lines of have to have basically almost a supply line kind of idea. And as you notice, there's no real market presence here in Europe, but however, every other sphere has different goods and different market things that they appeal to. Now, why is this important? Because of the global demand. Also, as part of the game, you have every turn 3 different goods that contribute to the global demand, and your ownership or your having more ownership of markets with these goods is going to provide you with victory point edges, and that is what you need, especially if things don't go well in other realms. So the circles are the markets. And finally, we have the last, which are my favorite, the hexagons. Hexagons, here. Notice again, only a couple over here in Europe, but there's a lot of there's naval presence, and then there are forts. So this is the naval ships where you can put your own squadrons, and then you have forts as well. And for example, the Ohio Forks Fort. These are sort of the protectorates of themselves. They're there for military prowess, but they're also there to protect or to make it more difficult for your opponent to mess with markets in the same area. Again, their costs are different. There's a lot of difference, but just forgetting everything else, those are the basic shapes, and that is the basic shape of how you're going to play. Now that you see it, you can not remember things, and you can start looking at some of the different quirks and idiosyncrasies. For example, now that you've seen the shapes and what they do, you can see some idiosyncrasies of those shapes. If it's green, there's a prestige place. In Europe, not only is it important to have more control, but if you have certain prestigious control, you're going to get additional victory points. This is kind of a Europe-only thing. Also, you'll have dots, and when you see things with dots, what you're going to see is that second of the wars, third of the wars, fourth of the wars, whichever war that this location here is going to actually contribute to, you're going to see it here. It's a nice mnemonic to be able to look at any given time for any upcoming war and decide whether you're really focused on preparing for that war or not. This will help you know that control of this will help you with that war. And that's really the essence of all that you need to learn. Connectivity-wise, you will see connections. Connections are important for spreading out or branching out markets, and for naval and military fort presence as well. You also have these conquer lines. These are important in war because these can help you use conquer points to conquer territories. These play a lot less of an important part every single turn, more than these connections, but you will find that out as you play the game. And that's it. That's the basic gist of the map for this. Now we're going to get into a initial sample turn. One additional thing I didn't mention, but I will, is that there is another type of shape, and that's these influence, or not influence, but advantage tiles. Advantage tiles exist and are littered all over the board. These are extra additional bonuses, boons, loot boxes, so to speak, that show up if you control whatever connects to them. If you control every single connection to a given advantage tile, you get the advantage tile. And as you'll notice, they do give special things. For example, here, because the French are always start with the raids here, is that on a given turn, you may use this to place a conflict marker, which can disrupt and mess with your opponent's supply lines. And then you can flip it up, use it again. So you can own a ton of these advantage tiles, and you'll see that they all connect. There's certain connections. There's even some, like here, that require that you have an alliance here and an alliance in this specific diamond in order to take the Italy influence. So those are an additional thing that you'll want to keep in mind. They seem ancillary, but they're very powerful, and they could be very pivotal in a timely contextual manner. All right, on to gameplay. As we begin, we'll look at the sequence of play. The sequence of play looks daunting. There are 14 steps in each and every turn. The reality is it's not daunting at all. Other than steps 9 and step 12, all of these are housekeeping chores, basically, that you do to keep the game state going. So 9 is the actions. That's where the players are taking their different actions for a piece each round, and then scoring is when you basically get the results of all your actions. Everything else is just handling different upkeep things going on, but we will go through them anyway. So skipping step 1, because we're just starting with the basic deck for the initial era, which is the era of succession. And then we do a debt limit increase, but we don't need to because that's only for certain rounds. Award phase, that's where we start flipping over to see which of these theaters is going to net us the most victory points. Here we go. And you'll see 4 different numbers. So not a lot of victory points to be earned in this theater, not many in this theater, not many in this theater, although, you are going to get treaty points, and those are a little bit of a benefit. This is the one that's going to give 2 victory points, but only if you are ahead of your opponent by 2. So a little bit more on that. The global demand phase is where you take of the 6 goods and you select 3 of them, which I've done here. This is the global demand. So these 3 commodities are global demand. This makes North America interesting. It makes India interesting, and and India interesting. So again, we're not going to see a lot of impetus in the Caribbean. for this particular reason either. And then the reset phase, if we had exhausted markers, which we don't, then we would flip them over in investment tiles and get everybody ready. And then the dealing card phase, and this is where you pick 9 investment tiles, which I've done here, and these are really the fuel that fuels each turn. Not kidding, not fueling. And then 3 event cards for each player. The event cards have to be noted within the well, actually, no, they're they're already noted. These are the succession cards that is part of the initial stack, and each of these events have different things. I won't go into great detail, but they all do different things. All of them have a bonus. If you have a minister with that particular bonus available, you're going to get extra goodies out of it. Almost always a good decision. Then the ministry phase. This is where, and I've selected 2 cards already, but you will go through and you don't have to shuffle or anything. You can pick any card that has a designation, for example, succession, and then E, and then finally empire, and then revolution. You pick 2 cards that you place down that you want to generally predict that you're going to be using that turn, or in order to, that would give you a benefit for this particular turn. And so we'll just keep going on that one. And then finally the initiative phase. Who has the initiative? Well, currently France. And so France can decide to go first, or it can decide its opponent goes first. This is a pivotal timing situation. All right, France is going to choose to go first. Looking over at the investment tiles, he sees one that's particularly inviting, and so he's going to mark use of that. This gives him 2 commodity points, commercial points, economic points. We'll call them economic points because that's what they are. And 2 political points, but he also gets to use an event and swap out a basic war tile. So what events can he use? Well, events that have the icons in the top left mean that you have to choose a tile that has a corresponding major investment number or icon accordingly. So the only event here that would matter is this one, famine in Ireland. So, grain shipments from America. Draw 1 bonus war tile for each space you control in Ireland and add them to the Jacobite Uprising Theater in the next war. So, what does that mean? It means I have 1 space I control right there in Ireland, which means that I'm going to get 1 bonus tile to put in the Jacobite Rebellion. Nice. The card, having been used, is discarded. Now, the tile also says that I can choose to swap out a basic tile, and then I'm going to use my investment points. I'm going to choose Queen Anne's War. I take a look at it. It's a 0, but it creates debt. So, we're going to pick this. Ooh, I like this better. +2. So we're going to put that there. This can go either back in the pool or out of the game. All right. Now we have 2 economic points to spend, and for our minor action, 2 political. So, first thing we're going to do is we're going to look into our opportunities for markets here. This is not, I'm not doing strategy, so this is not something you would normally do in a game. I'm pretty sure, because the global demand for this doesn't dictate it, but I'm going to go ahead and take my 2 points and put them here for this market, which then gives me this as a market. So you can't chain together in the same turn, but I already have one adjacent that connects to a territory. I'm good to go. Then I spend 2 political points. And so I'm going to go up here into Europe, and I'm going to choose where I want to place political points. I'm going to put it right here in Scotland. Look at that. Life is good. And that is the end of my use for this investment tile. Play switches right back over to Britain. Now Britain has an opportunity to decide what to do. And Britain is going to pick here. Yes, 3 military points, 2 political points. Yay. Now the interesting thing here is that there is an event possibility, and I have 2 events that don't require a particular icon, and so I can look at these and choose what I want to do. The top part here is what I want to go with. So I'm going to place 1. And notice that the bonus requires that I have a ministry card with governance. I do. I'm going to reveal that. Governance. Once per turn, you can draw one event card and discard an event card, so that's kind of nice. And then here, place one conflict marker in Spain. So, conflict marker goes into Spain. And because I have the bonus, I can remove a French bonus war tile from the next war. Ooh. Alright. And that event is also done. Then I get to spend my points. Now, I really, really would like to build here, just as an example, but it's 4 points. I only have 3. What do? Well, I can dig into my debt. And I can spend 1 debt to make it 4, and that will allow me, and there we go. I have taken over. There we go. And that's that. Now I also have 2 political points, so I too have aspirations and dreams. Now I can unflag one of the flags in Scotland or Ireland, and that leaves it pretty much unincorporated per se, or I can add my own flag of influence elsewhere. I am actually, at this point, going to unflag here, because I don't want him in Ireland. And that is the end of my action round 1. We've used 2 of the 9 tiles. This is going to happen back and forth for the next 3 tiles, or 3 tiles apiece for each player, after which they will have all of this filled up except for 1 tile. When that is done, the action phase is over. Any treaty points, which we didn't talk about, but there are ways to accrue treaty points, they too act as fuel, so you can use them to supplement the numeric number of strength of a given action on an investment tile. Can be used, but then you always have to go down to 4 at the end of your turn. You resolve any powers, some cards have powers and whatever, and then you do scoring, and scoring is pretty simple. You're going to each one, you're comparing here, scoring is pretty simple. You're comparing basically who has the most control in each of the 4 regions. Whoever has the most control is going to get the award. In this case, not much. So here you're going to count out the British flags versus the French flags. Whoever has the most is going to gain a victory point, and it's going to go back and forth on this tug of war. When that's done for all 4 theaters, you then also check the prestige. There is a prestige value in Europe for whoever controls the most prestige influence areas, and they will get 2 points as well. Finally, global demand will get its due. Whoever has the most fish, for example, whoever owns the most fish spots, is going to get 2 VP, but they're going to accrue a debt. Giveth and taketh. Same thing with spice. Spice has its own amount, and cotton is awesome, at least in the succession period. So, and that's it. That's the end of the peace phase. Now we're going to go over the war phase. So we already touched on war a little bit, but I'll go over it one more time, just so that it's understood. And I'm not going to do a full playthrough. There are some popping up on the internet right now that are doing much better justice to the full playthrough of a game. So if you are interested in this, or I've tickled your fancy, by all means invest in some of the great walkthroughs and playthroughs of the game that you will see coming out from fellow peers on YouTube. Here, war is upon us, and we will have, you'll notice, 1, 2, 3, 4 wars interspersed with our peace turns. In a given war, the way that it works out is you calculate army strength. So your initial thing is how much strength. So this is our base strength, 0, but with the enemy accruing a debt, and 1. So that is our base strength. That's where we start off from. And bonus strength, if there were any bonus tiles left, which there are not. And then you determine the winner. Well, bonus strength is bonus tiles, but also, and notice in Europe, you'll see if someone has influence in Austria, that's an extra point. Bavaria, Denmark, Dutch, German states in Savoy. So looking over here, you can tell that certain strength points are going to be given based on who controls the given locations. And all of that is added together. All of these inputs come together to determine a final value as to who won and who lost. For whoever wins, their reward is going to be based on the margin of victory, and they do vary considerably. And for example, 2 victory points, but larger victories net larger victory points. Loser gets something too, so you're going to have some way to try and stem the tide in the future, and turn back the, so that it doesn't just snowball into one giant win for one side or the other. Available territories. These are places, if you're going to use combat points, again, you can use combat points to really harm, do damage, take over, and control areas of the map that you otherwise couldn't during peacetime. Then these are the areas beyond just Europe where you are able to make those changes. So you can see the limits. And all 4 of these are resolved as a single war phase. When that happens, when everything's all done, we reset to the next war. When all that's done, we reset to the next war before moving on. We also do a victory check to see, because if a player wins every single theater with the absolute maximum amount of spoils, they just win outright. That's one way to just win out quickly. Then you check, otherwise you check the VP total. Whoever's at 30, France wins. At 0, Britain wins. And if not, then you just set up and you start again. And you're going to do this sequence of peace, war, peace, peace, war, peace, war, peace, war, peace, for this amount of times. And when that's done, if there hasn't been a victory by then it all gets counted into a final scoring round to determine the winner. There's a lot here to take in. I've shown you sort of an introductory level. I haven't gone into a lot of the details of conflict and damaged forts and control and all that, but that's all part of, say, the playthrough heck, I might even do a playthrough one of these days. But for now, I wanted to at least get you an example of what you're looking at for Imperial Struggle, both for those who are coming from Twilight Struggle and those who've never played Twilight Struggle before, to know what they're getting into and the kind of basic gameplay you can expect to experience. So let's get into my final thoughts.
Okay, final thoughts on Imperial Struggle. First, as always, let's go over the cons. This is not a 2-hour game that you're going to play as quickly as Twilight Struggle. It is not even close to a 2-hour game. None of my games have been even close to 2 hours. I suppose you could achieve a blitz victory, and that's possible, but in general, that's not how it's played out thus far. Twilight Struggle was easily more able to be played in the time frame of a couple hours or so. So if a longer game experience is not something you would be amenable to past Twilight Struggle's time frame, probably something to look at in your purchasing choice. The initial impression, honestly, when I laid out the board and and looked at the ruling stuff, it's like putting a paisley blouse on a paisley bed sheet. Your eyes will hurt at first glance. It was the largest difficulty in helping people overcome that I was playing this with, was just that initial whoa. In some ways, it feels like you're sitting down in the cockpit of 747 having no training. But that's where it kind of stops being complicated, because after that, as you start to unravel and expose sort of all of the different layers of this game, you're going to find yourself less trepidatious. In some ways, it's kind of like a football playbook. You start the season, brand new team, you look at the playbook, you're overwhelmed, it's insane, it's crazy. What happens by the end of the season, if you're like got propensity of football at all, is you can look at a glance and recognize, oh, that they're going to run that play against that defense. That makes sense and stuff. So you see that you go from that transition from, oh, what am I doing, to, oh, it all fits together nicely, and I can now start worrying about how I'm going to apply the lessons learned to these situations, which is great. There are admittedly a fefew typos. There's an errata. If you're interested, there are a couple little bumps on the board that weren't committed. Nothing at all nothing even remotely thwart your ability to play this game and play it at the highest possible level. So, but be warned, if you are someone who needs 100% complete perfection, you probably are watching my videos, and it's just be aware of that. So, and finally, Twilight Struggle was not a gateway game, obviously, but it was at least a step stool I could get generally somewhat interested gamers to kind of step up on and embark on. That is not Imperial Struggle. This is an escalator to the stars in contrast. So getting that out of the way. That's it really for the cons that I have. I'm going to do a specific section now and talk about the differences that I saw between Twilight Struggle and Imperial Struggle in more specific ways. One is Twilight Struggle is very, very simple in contrast. It's simple on the board. You have rectangles and you have cards. There's a beautiful simplicity to that game. So put that over there. Imperial Struggle is blatantly interconnected across time and landscape, and it is not the same thing. It is not even just looking at the maps, the two maps side by side, you're going to see a difference. One of it's because in Twilight Struggle, you're dealing with more of a modern day setting, and you're dealing with a very familiar map. Everyone has seen this map of the world. It's familiar, everything fits, everyone has kind of a precognizance of what they're going to expect. When you move over to Imperial Struggle, you've got 4 spheres zoomed in different, artistic ways. And so that can be a little bit of a, like I'm a bee with 100 eyes kind of staring at things. So that is a difference. Twilight Struggle was discrete and self-contained, clear decisions, I thought. It was all driven by the cards. Here, you're herding cats across 4 different spheres of dominance. Each one is a maze of twisty passages all alike. And that's going to be something that you're going to have to separate your mindset from as well. Tension is not necessarily the foundation of the gameplay's thrill for me in Imperial Struggle. In Twilight Struggle, tension was this back and forth, like razor's edge Cold War. Can I survive the self-infliction that my cards are going to cause because that's what I drew? Can I peg the line but not exceed and blow my engine kind of tension going on? This instead, Imperial Struggle, has an intentional feel of more of a simmering, relatively obvious conflict with expansiveness in place of subterfuge and interconnected motivations replacing the murky battle lines of Twilight Struggle. The other thing is Twilight Struggle had compartmental choices. You had, you have the map, which you change. You have the space race, which you go to. You have military ops that you have to fill. There's this sort of discrete TV dinner compartment kind of sections of the game. Imperial Struggle blends them much more together. You're mixing your peas and your mashed potatoes and your meats and all that kind of in together. Different kind of situation. So those are the differences. Now I'm going to get into the things I like about Imperial Struggle. Okay. Imperial Struggle is a sweeping lattice of overlapping decision spaces, and I love it. I absolutely love it. Once you remove the cobwebs of learning to understand, you've got military matters. It's significant. It's not battleship. It's a different kind of military motivation. You're using the military strength, your naval strength, and stuff in ways that make perfect sense and that fit in with the rest of the tension points. You've got economics that matter, and the global market is fickle, and you don't necessarily know how it's going to swing or sway, and so you've got to be adaptive to that. You've got your standard sort of influence, kind of the Twilight Struggle kind of thing, but and that matters directly in Europe, just like Twilight Struggle, but it also spreads out, and that influence has all of these indirect or less obvious ways that they have an impact. You have to keep an eye on Europe in war and as you're spreading out. That's really, really cool. And war is upon us 4 times a game, and its impact is both pronounced but manageable. It's not total tide swaying or not. There's plenty of mitigation points to go. Take my lumps, I can get through this. I can work my way around it. But war is still impacting. It feels good for the winner, and it feels at least survivable for the loser. Some, if they, in some way, I mean, war is war, so they're all different. I mean, I love that this game leaves me mentally bathing in historical ramifications all over the globe for all the kinds of decisions I'm making and the freedom to make those decisions. You're not limited by, I have these cards. Crap. What do I do? And I love that about Twilight Struggle because that's the point. Like, okay, I've got, if I can pull this off, okay, this could be the coup d'etat. The inputs in this game are what make it rife with possibility and interrelationships. By inputs, I mean you have events that you have and you can leverage. They're not random. They're there, and they have bonuses, which means you have to tie them to what you hope is a good governance cards or ministry cards. I'm sorry. You have advantage tiles that, once again, like they don't starve you from doing. They don't limit you in such a way that you're like, oh man, I got nothing to do this turn. You'll have something to do. It might not be the optimal thing you want to do, but you'll want to do it. And then, the advantage tiles are really fire starters for your actions because you augment them with debt or treaty points. The debt is interesting because you use it, it leaves you vulnerable, but you have to take that risk and go, I really need that extra point. Okay, debt it is. Or treaty points like, hey, cool, that's gonna boost me. Yeah, I lost a war, but okay, I gotta, gather, rally up, get up, only losers stay down kind of thing. And the wars, like 4 different wars, 4 different theaters, such a microcosm of gaming in its own right. The uniqueness, I have to worry about 4 battles at a time, and I have to worry about all the different like places of influence, and I want to get the rewards, and really, really, really like more intricate kind of a war scenario. I like it. Like, you are preparing for war, and war will play out. It will take extra time. It's not simple. It's not rolling the dice and seeing if you advance farther on the space race track or not. It is you are having to look at that and the map and the markets and your cards and your ministry. A lot of people might get overwhelmed. I really found that it flowed together as if it was someone spending years making a masterpiece, which I think it was. In some ways, all of these things together that I just mentioned, it almost feels like I'm playing these mini games within a game at times. Almost like there's a carnival barker going down the midway, step right up and take on the Jacobite cause, or, War of Austrian Succession, everyone wins a prize, or, hey, you want to win a colony for the lady? Mr. Bonus War Token guaranteed. I mean, I feel like all these things are coming at me, like I could do this and this and this and this. And that's the joy, is that I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, I got to prepare for this. It's not looking good in this theater. Is there anything I can do in this theater to mitigate it so that when scoring comes around, I might take my lumps here, but I might get a gain here that might equal it out or even put me on the edge and give me an advantage. All of these things are going on in your mind all the time when you're playing this game. And conflict, it's subtle, but it's not Cold War subtle, where you're like, okay, coup, cool. No, it's more like there's a lot of moments you're like, oh, you dirty rat, you just had to put that there, and stuff. I love it. I love it. Oh, well, sorry. Let me get to my final thoughts. So, when this was announced, initially there were a lot of ideas in my mind on what Imperial Struggle would be. Would it be a direct sequel to the Cold War? Would it be just a reskinning? With a few changes, because that would be the safe thing to do, and people would probably like, okay, yeah, they took, Twilight Struggle, changed a few things, made it fit this theme a little better, and shipped it out. No, they clearly wanted to do something that wasn't Twilight Struggle, even though there are premonitions of Twilight Struggle-like things within it at times, and that's a hard thing for someone who Twilight Struggle is and remains the #1 game I've ever played. Twilight Struggle was beautiful in its dual wielding of both simplicity and tension. But here's the thing, Imperial Struggle is gorgeously ornate and dazzling because of how you unearth and orchestrate all of these various goals across the entire globe in a less tense but still more thrilling dance of dominance that's constantly going on. So I don't know. I mean, there's no other way to say it than, when I thought about it, Imperial Struggle, in going through the stages of revelation as I open the box and go through it and realize that it both is and is not my father's Oldsmobile, so to speak. I realized I would not want this game any other way than it's arrived. It is exactly better and better. It's like every time I play it, I'm astounded. It is the game I was hoping for, even if it's not the one I originally envisioned or imagined they would come up with. Imperial Struggle, classic in its own right. Highly recommend it. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time on Harebrained Games.